Chaymer, the Mishnah on Chaf Amid Aleph. Chaymer be'erchen mi bin nedarim. Erachin. Someone takes a pledge that he's going to give the value based on the person's age. That's more strict than if someone takes a vow that he's going to give the value based on the person's value as a slave.
But is he going to do every single let's just say he's 11 pounds? 11.
No, now we're just saying he's taking a pledge. It's not, he's not saying the weight or all of that. He's just saying erachin, the erachin. So Ketzad, how do we see that there's a stringency of this over that? Ha'imar, if someone says, Erki alai, I'm pledging my value based on my own age, Umeis, and then the person dies, Yitnu Yarshim. The inheritors inherited that debt, and they have to pay their father's pledge. Demei alai, if the person says, I'm pledging my own value to the temple that I would be worth sold as a slave, Umeis, and the person dies, Lo Yitnu Yarshim. The inheritors do not have to give that pledge. She'ein damim lemeisim, because there's no value of a slave after the person dies. And obviously they can't do that evaluation on him after the person passed away. Let's say he said, that's one stringency that we have of erachin over a neder. Erech yadi verech ragli alai. If a person says, I'm pledging the value of the erech, I'm giving the erech of my arm or my foot, my leg. So he says, lo yamar klum. That's nothing. He didn't give anything. Erech reishi verech kvedi alai. Let's say he says, the erech of my head, the erech of my liver. So then, noisen erech kulei, he has to pay his entire erech based on his age. What's the rule? Ze'aklal. The rule is, davar shanashama tluya bai, anything that his life is dependent on, which is his head or his liver or his heart. So noisen erech kulei, he has to pay everything. But the arm, that he doesn't have to pay. We'll see in the Gemara exactly.
Is that sequence? Is that usually how it goes? Like it tells you these two things, and then it tells you a general rule. I feel like it should say no.
Sometimes it does that. The Zehaklals are usually at the end. Usually Zehaklal is at the end. I made a list based on some studies that we've done on different types of Mishnayos. There's 14 types of Mishnayos. And one of them is the Zehaklal. I did it for the curriculum, just to make sure that every type of Mishnah was studied in there. Okay, Chatzi Erki Alai. Someone says, half of my erech I'm accepting on myself. Listen, Chatzi Erki, he accepted half of his erech. So for example, if he's in between 20 and 60, his price would be 50 silver coins, 50 shkalim. He'd have to give 25. Erech Chatzi Alai, erech of half of me. How do you divide a person in half? From this way, that way, how do you divide that in half? So whatever it is, however you're going to divide it, there must be inside half of him an organ that his life is dependent on. So nice and erech kulai. So therefore he has to pay everything, because inside that half is either his head or his heart or something.
Does it have to do? He doesn't want to pay this. He just wants to pay his value. He's not. So why don't you go like this? Instead of going this way, which you cut the whole body, you do right here. Then you go through your stomach.
Right.
But that's the thing, that anywhere, even your arm, some people can't live with that.
I assume the Gemara is using the general terms, and half a person would be, he wouldn't be able to survive. Chatzi d'mei alai, if a person says half of my value as a slave, so nice and chatzi damav, exactly like we learned. D'mei chatzi alai, the value of half of me, nice and d'mei kulai. Over here he has to give his entire value, because he also can't live half. It has to be, that's his value as a slave. Ze'aklal, this is the rule. We do this again. This is very interesting. Davar shanashama tluya bai, nice and d'mei kulai. So, what did we say before in the Ze'aklal? Before the Ze'aklal said nice and erech kulai. Now we say nice and d'mei kulai. So this applies both to erechin and to a pledge of a person's value. Whatever type of pledge it is, if in that pledge is an organ that he needs for survival,
Erachin is a person's value.
so So let's just
Wait for the
clarify. No. Just so whether it's erech or whether it's value as a slave, if it contains in that an organ that he needs for his life, so then he has to pay everything. Now, when it comes to chatzi erki or chatzi dami, Chaim, he's not pledging half of himself. He's pledging his home to pay half of his whole self. Right? He says, I'm giving half of my value, not the value of half of me. And then you have to figure out which half of him, the upper part, the lower part. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, I'm pledging half of my entire value.
What happens if he says I'm pledging everything but the organs I need to live? Because you said without that, so he'll just be organs, so for sure die. Like, what's the... And he's not doing any of his life organs.
Anything, if he pledges any of the organs that he needs for survival, then it's the whole person.
So
right?
this person it won't be, even though he's gonna die either way. If you take away his whole
So then
body,
it must
except
be
for
that he would need it for survival. If he needs it for survival,
his whole body.
then it would be everything.
I mean, it's his whole body. So that means if he does his arm, then he has to do the whole thing.
The arm itself is not. Right? The arm itself he doesn't need for survival. People live without the arm.
But you're saying both his arms and his legs.
Maybe that would switch. I don't know. It's an interesting point. The Gemara doesn't. The Mishnah doesn't discuss it. Someone says someone else's erech, I'm accepting. Okay, now there's two people involved. So there's different options here. Things that could go wrong. Let's say they both, the subject, the one that took the pledge, and the object, the one he's the one, his value is being pledged. What's a better word for it than the object? I don't know.
The object being the plony or the...
Plony, yeah.
Plony, the other guy's eye.
Okay. So I don't want to use the eye over here, but the subject and the object die. So Yitnu Ayarshim. This is interesting. But this is by Erachin. So far we already learned that, right? Because by Erachin we said this was the stringency of Erachin over Nedarim, that if the person dies, the inheritors have to pay it. Right. By a neder, it's different. Damav shel ploni alai. Let's say a person takes a person's value as a slave and he pledges someone else's value. Umeis hanoider. This case we didn't have before. Meis hanoider. The one that took the pledge dies. Yitnu ayarshim. The inheritors have to pay it. But Meis hanider, this case is what we explained before. If the one that was pledged, the object, dies, then the inheritors don't have to pay because there is no estimation for someone after someone dies to say what he's worth. Now, in the first case of the Mishnah, it was all one person because he was saying my value is on me, and then we didn't elaborate on that. It's really 2 points there. What's the main point? The fact that he took the pledge, or the fact that value was pledged. Now, in the end of the Mishnah, we divide it up.
That answers a question that I had last time. What happens if in his will specifically he says, I want to pay the amount that I have when I die? Because that would be way more.
Oh, and the weight.
Yeah, and
the weight. The weight was before. We're not discussing the weight.
No, I'm saying what happens if he specifically said, and over here it says that he doesn't pay with a body that already died.
Right. That was a person's value as a slave.
Yesterday we had the suggestion that we hold the questions.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise you'll not get through.
Tanur Rabbanan, we have to do two blot today. Tanur Rabbanan. The rabbis taught in a brisa. Chaymer b'nedarim mi be'erchen. There's a stringency of vows over erchen. That's the opposite of our Mishnah, right? Shanedarim chalen ala behema chayav ha'if. When it comes to a vow, a person can take a vow, and he could take a vow of the value of an animal, a beast, or a bird. And also by nedarim, it doesn't matter if he can afford it or not. He has to pay, and it's owed to him. He owes it as a debt, whether he can afford it or not. Mashenkin be'erchen. By erchen, it depends if he's. It depends on if he can afford it. If he can't afford it, he pays the lowest. He goes down to even one coin, right? That's what we learned before by Erachin. Even though he takes a pledge and he pledges someone's age, but then when it comes time to payment, or is it the time of payment? We discussed it. Not exactly the time of payment, but then when it comes to actually paying, we look at what he owns and we say that he can't afford it to pay the one coin. So by Nidarim, there's a stringency there. The stringency, first of all, that it applies to animals, and also there's no bracket that allows him to pay less if he is not in the doesn't have the means. Chaymer be'erkin min Nidarim. What's the stringency of Erachin? This was our Mishnah, but now we're learning it from a Brisa. Ketzad Omar Erki Alai. If someone says my value umeis, and then he dies, Yitnu Yarshim, the inheritors have to pay. The Me'alai umeis, he says my value as a slave, then Lo Yitnu Yarshim. Shein Damim Lamesim. That's what we learned in the Mishnah. There's no value. You can't evaluate a person after he dies what he's worth as a slave. Omar Erki Alai umeis. If he says, we're going back to explain this Brisa. If he says my value is upon me, he's accepting his own value, and then he dies. He said, Yitnu Yarshim, the inheritors have to pay. Rabbi Naftali, look at this. Shema Mina, we see from this that Milval Pegavim Mina Yarshim. It's a verbal pledge.
Yeah.
It's a verbal pledge, and he owes it to the Bezdin. There's no document here that says that he owes it. The inheritors need to pay. Usually if there's a document, then you can take it away from the inheritors. Here we're saying that even if it's just by word of mouth, it's a milval peh.
Then that makes it so complicated.
Nevertheless, you can go to the inheritors and take the money out, even though it's all verbal. The Gemara says, Shani Hacha, here it's a different case. The milva ksuva b'Torah. Because this is a type of milva that's written in the Torah. Why? Because when someone says Erechi or Erki, he says, you look it up in the Torah, and over there it says what he owes. So there is a document here. It's the Torah. And now we see that a debt that's written in the Torah is as if there's a clear document. And if there's a document, then everyone agrees you could go take that away from inheritors. See, over here, there's no problem. Because what the Gemara is saying is that
the Torah is the star. The Torah is the star.
But even though you were just pointing out that the halacha is milva alpeh is gavim min yarshim, and the Gemara is using that as a question. Milva alpeh gavim min yarshim. How could you say that? And we have to come to an answer. What the Gemara is doing is it's saying that we know that there's a machlokes if milva alpeh is gavim min yarshim, but if you have a clear Mishnah, so that should determine something, because we have a clear Mishnah that says milva alpeh gavim min yarshim. The Gemara says no. There's no raya from this Mishnah that it's a milva pegav min yarshim. Could be that over here it's a milva ksuva b'Torah, and milva ksuva b'Torah is kishtar damya. Okay. The Gemara says achmaiskina kishamad bedin. See, the problem was we have to choose one of these answers. Why do the inheritors have to pay this debt? It's either a milva alpeh or it's a milva ksuva b'Torah, which is considered a shtar. Both of those are machlokes. Now, whichever way we go here, the Mishnah is determining one side of those machlokes. So in order to avoid getting into that conflict, because that would prove to one side of that argument, and it would be a question on the other side, the Gemara answers, Hacha b'mayaskina, and you see the abbreviation, Hacha b'mayaskina, Kishamad bedin. Talking about he was already in court, and the Bezdin already paskin that he needs to pay. So therefore, it's not considered like just some agreement that no one knows about. It's already in court, and even if you don't hold of milval peh, you can collect from the inheritors. But once it was in court already, and it was paskin that you can collect, so then you go back to that and you collect. The Gemara asks, 1 second. We made a contrast between Erachin and Nidarim. We said that Erachin you need to pay, even if the inheritors need to pay, and the Nidarim not. The Kavasei Gabi Dam Demei Alai. But the contrast needs to be all variables need to be the same, except for that one variable that we're contrasting. What's the contrast here? Is Erech or Demei? Erech is by the person's age, Dmei is by how much he's worth as a slave. If by Erechin it was already in court, and that's why he has to pay, so Dmei Alai is also Shamad Badin. It was also in court. Amayla Yitni Yarshim. Why don't the inheritors have to pay if he was evaluated as a slave? The Gemara says, Dmei Alai Mechusar Umdana. It was in court, and they said that he has to pay. But then they have to take him out to the marketplace to see how much he's worth as a slave, and that they didn't do yet. And then the guy dies. So, Erki Alai Lai Mechusar V'lei Klum. When he says Erki Alai, he doesn't need to go outside and for someone outside to guess his age. We knew his age already. But by the Umdana, by the Dmei, he has to go out and someone has to evaluate what he would be worth as a slave, and that was never done. And because he passes away before that was done, that's why he doesn't have to pay it, even though we know that he needs to pay.
So the Erchin for the slave is never actually done.
Don't use the word Erchin.
I know, I'm
because
sorry.
that's
The
Umdana.
Umdana.
The evaluation,
So he
the
needs to pay-
appraisal.
He needs to know he needs to pay and the value.
Right,
Both things.
right. There's a verdict, and then you have to figure out what the price is. But the verdict was there. Then the price wasn't there. So because the price wasn't there, so he doesn't have to pay. Erech Yadi V'Ragli Alai. Okay, we're going to have a few short Gemaras here, just like little pieces, and this should go quickly. If someone says he's pledging the value of his arm or his leg, Amrav Gidl Amarav. Gidl Amarav throws in over here that we said that he doesn't owe anything. Want to see Rav Gidl Amarav? We don't have Rav Gidl, but we have Rav. We're going to have later today Rav Yehuda Amarav. We're going to have Shmuel. Rav Gidl is common, but he happens to be not on the chart. So it's a student of the first generation Amiram, which is very common for the beginning of an introduction of explaining a Mishnah. It's very common for first generation Amiram to explain the Mishnah. So, but they qualify the Mishnah. So Amar Rav Gidl Amarav v'naisin damel. It's a little strange. We said he doesn't know anything. He says he's pledging his arm. Rav Gidl Amarav says, but he has to pay its value as a slave. What it would be worth. Remember we discussed what it would be worth in damages, or as a slave with the arm, or the Gemara says v'hal lo yamar klum ketani. The Mishnah says lo yamar klum. That means he said nothing. He said nothing means that he doesn't owe anything. So the Gemara says lo yamar klum l'Rabbanan v'naisin demel l'Rab Meir. Now this Gemara's answer throws us back onto Daf Hey. What happened was on Daf Hey, we said that exactly this case. It starts off differently. The Mishnah said if someone pledges under an erech, if someone pledges the value of someone under a month old, which the Torah doesn't discuss, under a month, it seems that there's nothing. So if he pledges what he's worth as a slave, so he has to pay that. But if he pledges the erech, which that's by a person's age, there's no such thing. Now Reb Meir says, yeah, but if he says the erech of someone that's under a month, he has to pay what he would be worth as a slave, even though there is no erech. And Reb Meir explains, or the Gemara explains, Reb Meir, that in adam maitzi devarav levatala. If he said it, he must have said it for a reason. And what he meant to say is the person's worth as a slave. The Rabbanan say no. Adam maitzi devarav levatala. A person can say something that has no meaning, and he said erech of someone that's under a month, and he doesn't mean to give anything. Comes over here. If someone pledges his arm, so there's a machlekes Reb Meir and the Rabbanan. According to the Rabbanan, Adam maiti dvarav lebatala. Person would say something that's meaningless, and so therefore he doesn't have to give anything. He said a meaningless statement. He says he's giving the erech of his arm. There's no erech into the arm. Life isn't dependent on that. However, according to Reb Meir, that ein Adam maiti dvarav lebatala, so therefore he must have meant something. So he has to pay the arm's value. The Gemara says, "Ha amracha de zimra." We had that back on Daf Hey. Dam Rav Gidl Amar Rav. Rav Gidl said in the name of Rav, "Ha'ima erech kleze alai naisin dama." Over there we said that if someone says the erech of a utensil, there's no such thing. We had a machlokes over there, Reb Meir and the Rabbanan, if adamaiti dvar levatala. It says over there. No, based on according to Reb Meir, that he would need to pay even by a utensil. So if he needs to pay by utensil, for sure he needs to pay by an arm. Gemara says no. I need to say it both. I need to have two statements from Gidl Amarav. I wouldn't have known one from the other. Mahu the Tema, what might I have said? Hasim Hudadami Deshain Erech Lekeli. Everyone knows that there's no such thing as erech to a utensil. The Gamar Varmal Shem Damim must be that he intended to have its value. Not the value as a slave, its actual value, because it's a utensil. Aval Hacha, but over here, Mitikatai, he's making a mistake. Because he knows that there is such a thing as a head and a liver when it comes to Erechin, that he has to pay the whole value. So he thinks that it should work. Not that he's assuming that it should be. Not that he's assuming, not that he's really intends for not that he intends for damim, for value. He's really intending for Erechin. He thinks that Erechin works, but it really doesn't work. So the halach is that he doesn't have to give anything. That's what I could have thought. Aval Dmei Lo Kamar, but he didn't mean to say the value of it. He meant really Erechin. He never had any intention for value. Kamash Malan that no. Kamash Malan that his intention was value, and that he wasn't making a mistake. And what he said was the wrong word, but of course he meant to say the value.
So that's why Rav Meir says.
That's why you have to say the second one of Gidl Amarav. Erech Reishi Erech Kveid Inais Nerech Kulai. Someone pledges the value of his head, the value of the erech of his liver. He has to give his entire value. Why? My time in the nefashos kamarachmana. In the pasuk over there by Erchin it says nefashos, which means the person's soul, person's life, and that's something that his life is dependent on. So he has to pay the whole thing. We're explaining here words of the Mishnah. We get small quotes, and then the Gemara just. Nowadays, what we would have done is we would have taken the Mishnah, put it in bold letters, and we would have put the Gemara in smaller letters, and we would have read it like this. But the way we are doing it here is we put it all in the same font, and we just chop it up into small pieces, and we reread it. And it's like little quotes, and then the Gemara just elaborates. But the Gemara's elaboration is also small quotes, so unless you clarify which one's the Mishnah, which one's the Gemara, so from context you can see it. Anything that life is dependent on means that you have to pay the erech and lasuyim and arkuva l'lamayla. It's coming to include if someone says from the knee and above, or from the thigh. Arkuva is a little confusing because it means two things. From the thigh and above, which we said that would make a person a treifa if he's missing from his thigh and above. So that's also considered. You follow? That's also considered something that his life is dependent on. Tosfos over here asks, why are we choosing that treifa over all the other treifas? We could have chosen anyone. Okay. Chatzi erki alai. Someone says half of my value. It means you have an erech, but I have. He's not giving the full erech. He has to give noisen. He has to give half of his erech, half of his value. Taner rabban chatzi erki alai noisen chatzi erki. Half of his value. He has to give half of his value. Let's say he's in between 20 and 60, so he has to give, instead of 50 coins, 25 coins. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Aimer. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda is Rabbi Yossi ben Chalaf's son. I'm sorry, Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Lai's son. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Lai's son is Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. He's actually on the chart. It's down there. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Lai's son is Rabbi Yossi. He's a third, like a grand student of Rabbi Akiva. Right? Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says, Loike, he gets lashes, and he has to pay the full price. The Gemara immediately asks on him, Loike amai, why is he getting lashes? All he did was he said, I'm pledging half of my. That's quite a punishment for someone that's giving a donation. So, and he has to pay more. Amar of Papa comes along, the Amira of Papa, to explain Rav Papa's down here, jumped many generations, student of Rava. Rav Papa comes along and says, Loike berech shalim. Not that he gets lashes. He gets hit. This is a term that we use even in English. He gets hit with a fine, right? Do we use that? No? Is that right? He gets hit with a fine. A penalty. Berech shalim, he has to pay the full price. My timer. There's a, what's the reason? See the abbreviation there? My timer. Because it's very confusing. It could get confused. If he says chatzi erki, half of my value is a gzeira, he has to pay the full price. It's a gzeira because if he says erech chatzi, the value of my half of me, of where over there he does have to pay the full price. Erech chatzi avidav shen Hashem b'tliva. Like is saying that he gets hit with this extra fine or this penalty, this because of gzeira, that it's very similar to erech chatzi, the value of my half, or of half of me. Okay. Now what the Gemara says, chatzi domi olai. He says half of my value as a slave. Excuse me. So nice and chulu, nice and chulu, he has to give half of his value. Demei chetzi olai. He says the value of my half, or the value of half of me. Nice and demei kuli, he has to pay his full price. My timer, what's the reason? The Gemara asks, Neder be'erkecha nefashis ksiv. But the verse that discusses Erachin also has the word neder in there. And it says be'erkecha nefashis, but it also says neder be'erkecha nefashis. It has the word neder in there, which means that anything that his soul is dependent on, because it has the word, the stress is the nefashis, and the stress is the neder as well. Zeh HaKlal, this is a rule called the Davar Shana Shamatli, by anything that life is dependent on makes him chayiv in his whole on his whole price. This is coming to include what we did before by Erachin. We said it's coming to include if he's something that would make him into a treifa. Taner Rabbanan. Here, it's a Gemara similar to Gemara to what we had before. Hamarech Chatzi Erech Keli. Someone gives the half of the value of a utensil. No, there's no such thing as erech by a utensil. We mentioned before that there's a machlekes between Reb Meir and the Rabbanon if other mighty dvar of levatala. If a person says something that's meaningless, does he mean to apply meaning to it? And he actually means something meaningful. So Reb Meir, I'm a nice and dumb. Reb Meir says he has to pay its value. I wrote on, when I was learning this morning, I'm not clear if he has to pay the full value. I don't know if there's a note over there. I didn't have a note in my Gemara what that means. There's a note in the art scroll. Well, you just let me know. Chachamim Maimrim. You see anything? On Reb Meir when it says nice and dumb. Let's go before it. It says nice and to make cool, right? There's also no. Okay. Nice and to make cool. Chatzi Keli. The Meir gives half its. He gives half its worth. They add in the word half. I don't have my pencil here. Can I use your pencil? Rabbi scroll. Right. Okay. So he has to give half its value. Because again, Reb Meir holds that a person doesn't say something meaningless. But Chamim say that he doesn't. I'm still thinking about this, because why should he have to give half? Half of it is there such a thing as neshama tliya by a keli? I mean, half a utensil is nothing, right? It's a broken utensil. Okay, the Chachamim say layam klem. He doesn't say anything.
In theory, you could have two neighbors who own one utensil. They each buy half of it so they could make their bread, or not so far-fetched.
Okay. Rabba Chalash. It says in our Gemara Rava, but the editors
say
here
say
it's Rabba.
Yeah.
The Shita Mekabetza says it's Rabba.
Makes perfect sense.
Rabba was ill because Abaya is a student. So Ola Gabe Abaya v'Rabbanan v'Yasef v'Kamri. Abaya and the rabbis went to visit Rabba. and they were sitting over there. They said like this: Bishleimer Rab Meir, Kosavrina the Mitzvah Levatala. We understand what Rab Meir holds, that a person would never say something meaningless. So it doesn't matter if he said the whole keli or half the keli. It has to be, you have to ascribe meaning to it. But what do the rabbis hold? Kasavri, I have to add in that word. Kasavri, if they hold other mitzvah dvar levatala, that a person does say something meaningless. Afilu kulai nami. Then why was the case chatzi keli? Chatzi keli, it sounds like saying yadi. But if you would have said a whole keli, then you would have been chayiv. Why did Brisa choose a case that's alluding to that it would have been different if I would have said kulai? So, if the rabbis hold that if a person says something, that a person can say something meaningless, so even if they would have said the whole keli, it would have been pater from paying. And if a person doesn't say anything meaningless, afilu chetzav nami, then why isn't he chayiv in that case that we said? So Amar lahu, what do we add in over here? Rabba, you have to take out Rabba Vabaya. Amar lahu Rabba says, Rabbanan dehacha, when it says over here that there's a Rabbanan that's arguing on Reb Meir, this Rabbanan actually holds of the other Reb Meir. In other words, a lot of times students get confused with this. They say, oh, there's a Tanakama here, and there's a Tanakama there. Tanakama must be the same Tanakama, right? Or if there's Chachamim here and Chachamim there, must be the same Chachamim. It's not necessarily so.